It was the autumn of 1880 when the wind over Hollow Creek began to carry strange sounds, not of animals or thunder, but whispers. Locals in the small town of Millstone, Missouri, spoke of the woods as if they were alive, trees that groaned like aching bones and shadows that seemed to breathe. But for Eli Turner, a 27-year-old trapper with a restless spirit, the woods were simply a place to make a living. He had known hunger, cold winters, and the disappointment of broken promises. To him, danger was part of life. Superstition wasn't. He and his two closest friends, Caleb Dunn, a former Civil War soldier, and Jesse Porter, a jovial farmhand, decided to head into the Hollow Creek woods for a week-long hunting trip. The game was rumored to be plentiful, but as they packed their rifles and provisions, the local shopkeeper, old Mrs. Dobbins, warned them quietly, "Men going up Hollow Creek lately, they don't come back the same." If they come back at all, Eli smiled politely, tipping his hat. "Don't worry, ma'am. We'll be back, before the frost sets in." He didn't notice the tremor in her hands, or the tears she wiped away as they rode off into the trees. The path to Hollow Creek twisted like a serpent through the hills. By noon, the men had crossed the old ironwood bridge where the wooden planks creaked beneath the weight of their horses. Caleb, quiet as ever, kept glancing into the tree line. "You hear that?" he asked. Jesse laughed. "Hear what, your conscience?" But there was a sound, faint, rhythmic, like footsteps keeping pace with them, though no one was there. The forest grew denser the farther they went, the light dimming even though the sun still hung high. That night, they made camp near the water. The creek shimmered under the moonlight, but the air felt heavy, like it carried a secret. Eli awoke to the sound of splashing. He turned and saw a figure standing knee-deep in the creek, motionless, facing away. He called out, no response. When he blinked, the figure was gone. He convinced himself it was just moonlight and exhaustion, but the chill in his bones said otherwise. By the third day, they stumbled upon a weather-beaten cabin, half swallowed by vines. A hand-carved sign hung by the door, Turner's Rest. "Your kinfolk been here, Eli?" Jesse joked. Eli frowned. His family had never owned land this far north, yet the name, it unsettled him. Inside, the cabin was dusty but intact. A table, a hearth, 3 chairs, and a single book on the shelf. The Ledger of the Woods. Caleb opened it carefully. Inside were names and dates, dozens of them, all ending with a single word beside each, taken. The last entry read, September 3rd, 1879, Henry Cole, Samuel Briggs, Luke Turner, taken near the Hollow Creek Bend. Luke Turner. Eli froze. That was his uncle's name, a man who vanished when Eli was a child. Jesse tried to laugh it off, but the sound of something dragging across the roof silenced them. When Eli stepped outside with his rifle, there was nothing there, only claw marks etched deep into the wood. The next night Jesse went missing. They had heard him leave the camp for a moment to fetch water from the creek. Then came the scream. By the time Eli and Caleb reached the bank, all they found was his lantern floating on the surface, still burning, though there was no wind. They searched until dawn. No footprints, no blood, only the sound of water gurgling as if whispering Jesse's name. Caleb wanted to leave. "Something's wrong here, Eli. This place ain't right." But Eli's pride, and the memory of his uncle, held him back. He felt that Hollow Creek owed him an answer. When he looked down at the water, he thought he saw Jesse's reflection smiling up at him, though no one stood beside him. Caleb finally gave in and said they'd leave at first light. But during the night, Eli couldn't sleep. The cabin creaked and faint tapping echoed beneath the floorboards. He moved the rug aside. Beneath it, he found a loose plank. Inside the hollow were 3 damp letters, each sealed with wax. They were brittle, written in the same shaky handwriting as the ledger. The last one was addressed to whoever comes after, beware the silence. The letter told of men lured into the woods by a voice that sounded like their own, calling them deeper until they vanished. The woods remember names, it read, and it hungers for those who share the blood of the first lost. Eli's hands trembled. Luke Turner. The woods had taken his uncle, and now it wanted him. At dawn, a thick fog rolled in. They tried to find the trail back, but every direction led them in circles. Caleb shouted, frustrated, then froze mid-word. His face turned pale. From somewhere in the fog came a voice, his wife's voice. "Caleb, come home." Eli knew what the letter had warned. The woods mimicked loved ones, but Caleb ran toward the sound before Eli could stop him. A moment later came a single gunshot. Silence. Eli followed the tracks until they disappeared into the mud. He found Caleb's rifle resting against a tree, but no sign of him. Only his hat remained, caught on a branch, and a mark on the tree, as though someone had burned a handprint into the bark. Eli was now alone. Eli's mind began to fray. Hunger, exhaustion, and fear clawed at him. He followed the creek downstream, hoping it would lead him out. But the landscape refused to change. As night fell, he crouched by the water to drink. The reflection that looked back at him was not his own. Older, gaunter, with hollow eyes. And then the reflection spoke. "You shouldn't have come, Eli." He stumbled back, trembling. The reflection continued, voice rippling like the current. "They took your uncle. They took your friends. And soon, you'll take their place." Eli screamed and fired into the water. The echo faded, but the bullet never made a splash. The water stayed perfectly still. He dropped his rifle and ran until his legs gave out. When he finally stopped, he realized he'd come full circle, back to the cabin. Eli sat by the fire, staring at the flickering flames, whispering to himself. Then came a knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. He hesitated, then opened it. Jesse stood there, pale, soaked, eyes vacant. "You left me," Jesse said softly. Eli tried to embrace him, but his arms passed through. The air around Jesse shimmered like heat on metal. "You can't leave Hollow Creek," Jesse murmured. "It doesn't let go." Then he vanished, leaving behind his old pocket knife, rusted and engraved with his initials. Eli fell to his knees, clutching it tight, whispering, "I'm sorry." Outside, the wind howled, carrying what sounded like laughter. At dawn, Eli saw smoke in the distance and stumbled toward it. There, he found an old hermit tending a fire beside a crooked shack. The man looked ancient, skin like bark, eyes clouded white. "You seen my friends?" Eli asked weakly. The old man nodded slowly. "You're the Turner boy. I knew your uncle. The woods marked him, same as it marked you." He told Eli that Hollow Creek was cursed generations ago, when settlers cut down the sacred grove of the Osage tribe. The spirits of the grove demanded payment in blood, taking one soul for every tree felled unjustly. Each generation, the woods called out to a Turner to keep the balance. If resisted, it would take others, hunters, wanderers, innocents, until the debt was paid. "The only way to end it," the old man said, "is to give the woods what it's owed, a willing heart." Eli felt his throat tighten. "You mean, I have to die?" The old man's eyes flickered. "Not die. Choose." Eli returned to the creek one last time. The fog had lifted, and the water gleamed with morning light. He could almost hear the laughter of his friends in the wind. He knelt beside the water and whispered, "If it's me you want, take me. But let them go." The forest went still, no birds, no breeze. The surface of the creek rippled, then stilled again. He saw three reflections: Caleb, Jesse, and his uncle, smiling faintly. Eli felt warmth spread through his chest, like sunlight. He closed his eyes and disappeared into the mist. Hours later, a group of farmers found the cabin. It was empty, save for 3 rifles, a rusted pocket knife, and a ledger open to a new line. October 14th, 1880, Eli Turner, given, not taken. The curse, it seemed, had been broken. But sometimes, when the fog rolls in over Hollow Creek, locals say they see a figure walking along the bank, lantern in hand, guarding the woods he gave himself to. And if you listen closely, the wind still whispers his name. By 1920, the story of Eli Turner had become a fireside legend in Millstone. Children dared each other to walk to the edge of Hollow Creek at dusk. The grown-ups, though, they still refused to cross the bridge. The forest remained untouched. No one hunted there anymore. They said the trees grew thicker every year, as if guarding something sacred. One foggy autumn morning, a young schoolteacher named Clara Jennings moved to town. She had a fascination with local folklore and history, and when she heard the story of Hollow Creek, she couldn't resist. Every legend has a truth buried somewhere, she told her students. That truth, however, was buried deeper than anyone imagined. Clara began her research in the dusty back room of Millstone's small library. There she found an old county survey map. Ink faded, edges torn. But something caught her eye. A faint marking near Hollow Creek labeled Turner's Rest. When she showed it to the librarian, the woman frowned. "Best not to go there, Miss Jennings. People say the woods don't like visitors." Clara smiled kindly. "Neither do most legends. But they deserve to be understood." That evening, she traced the path on the map and packed a lantern, journal, and compass. The moon was full, the same phase it had been when Eli vanished. As Clara approached the bridge, she felt the same unease the old stories described. The planks beneath her feet groaned. The air seemed thicker, heavier. And then she heard it. Faint laughter, childlike, echoing through the fog. She froze, clutching her lantern. But when she turned, no one was there, only the creek below, glowing faintly in the moonlight. For a moment, she considered turning back, but the wind carried a whisper, soft and pleading. "Help me find peace." It wasn't a threat. It was sorrow. Clara took a deep breath and crossed the bridge. It took hours to find it. But there it was. The Turner cabin still stood, half swallowed by moss and ivy. The roof sagged and the door hung crookedly, but it was unmistakable. Inside, everything was covered in dust, except the ledger on the table. Its pages were clean, as if someone had touched it recently. The last entry was Eli's. But beneath it, a new line had appeared, written in fresh ink. "The woods remember kindness." Clara's heart raced. The ink was still wet. As she turned to leave, a flicker of light appeared outside, a lantern swaying through the trees. She called out, thinking it might be a hunter or local farmer. A man stepped into view, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an old trapper's coat. His lantern glowed warm and steady, but his face, it looked familiar, weathered, kind, and impossibly calm. "You shouldn't be here, miss," he said softly. "The woods have slept long enough." Clara stammered, "I mean no harm. I'm only searching for the truth." The man studied her, then smiled faintly. "Truth is what keeps this place at peace, but it must be told gently." When she blinked, he was gone. The only thing left where he stood was a rusted pocket knife engraved with the initials J.P. That night, Clara camped near the cabin, her lantern casting long shadows. Exhaustion pulled her into sleep. And that's when the dream came. She saw 3 men walking through the forest, laughing, talking. Then the fog rolled in. One by one they vanished until only one remained, Eli Turner. He stood beside the creek, speaking softly. The woods took, because we took. But when one gives, all are forgiven. The dream ended with the image of Eli turning toward her, his hand outstretched. Tell them, Clara. Tell them I stayed by choice when she woke. Her lantern was still burning, though she was certain she'd blown it out. At dawn, she explored the cabin again and found something wedged inside the old hearth, a letter, brittle but sealed with wax. It was addressed to the next who listens. Inside, written in graceful script, were Eli Turner's final words. If you find this, know that Hollow Creek is not cursed. It was only wounded. Men took what was sacred and forgot to say thank you. I gave my years so the woods might breathe again. If you walk these grounds with respect, you'll hear not cries, but songs. Clara read the letter aloud, and for a moment the forest around her seemed to sigh. The leaves rustled softly, like applause. Clara returned to town with her notes, the letter, and the pocket knife. She presented them at the town hall meeting, where older residents whispered in disbelief. One elderly man, Sheriff Amos Reed, stood up with tears in his eyes. My great-granddaddy was part of the search party that looked for Eli Turner, he said. Said he always felt Eli's ghost kept watch over this town. Maybe he wasn't wrong. From that day forward, Hollow Creek was declared protected land. No logging, no hunting. The woods, once feared, became a place of reflection. Children grew up hearing Eli's story, not as a ghost tale, but as one of sacrifice and harmony with nature. By 1980, the legend of Hollow Creek had softened into local folklore. Visitors came to see the cabin, now a small memorial maintained by the Millstone Historical Society. Every October, candles were placed along the creek to honor the lantern keeper. No one knew who started the tradition, but somehow, each year, one lantern would stay lit until dawn, even through wind and rain. Then one evening, a young boy named Eli Jennings, Clara's great-grandson, wandered too far into the trees. He was found hours later safe, sitting by the creek, holding a lantern. A nice man kept me company, he said innocently. He said the woods are never lonely anymore. When asked what the man looked like, Eli said, like me, but older. Present day. Hollow Creek remains quiet, serene, a sanctuary of moss, pine, and memory. Visitors still claim they feel watched, but not in fear, in comfort. A plaque by the cabin reads, Eli Turner, 1853 to 1880. He gave so others might return. Sometimes, when fog drifts low over the water, the reflection of a lantern can still be seen moving between the trees. Locals say the woods finally learned gratitude, and maybe that's the real heart of the story. That even in the darkest places, redemption can take root if someone is brave enough to give instead of take. As the legend of Hollow Creek fades into history, the wind still whispers one name, not in warning, but in peace. Eli. And the creek answers softly, like a lullaby that never ends.